Hello, this is Miss Kimberly with EVPL Red Bank, and the DIY video we're doing today is hot glue casting. So I'm going to show you how to use hot glue instead of things like resin or bronze to cast an object. So what you need for this is, of course, a hot glue gun and plenty of sticks for glue. Remember, the larger object that you're going to be casting, the more glue sticks you're going to need. You're going to need something to create your mold in. So I like using Play-Doh. You can also use modeling clay. Play-Doh is nice because it's really squishy, so if you're going to do multiple castings, it's easy to squish it up and flatten it back out again for your next project. You're going to need some scissors for trimming your result and some paint and paintbrush to decorate it afterwards. And of course, you're going to need whatever shapes you're using to create your casting. So you're going to want to use something that has some detail in it. Like you can see this rose button has lots of nice clear petals, or seashells are really good because you can see all the nice ridges on them that'll come out in the casting. Or this button has a nice anchor on the top of it, raised anchor on it. You don't want something that has too much fine detail, because the finer the details, the more blurry they're going to come out in the mold. But you want something that's going to show up real well. So let's clear some of these out of the way. And we're going to start off with something nice and simple, like a seashell. So you see all these nice little ridges on here? That's why we like this, because those should show up really nicely. Now you can see it's not really big. So we're going to start off with something nice and small. You can do larger castings. Let's say you wanted to do something really huge like a starfish. You could do this. You can see it's got lots of nice shapes that would show up. Just remember, you're going to need a lot of glue for something like this. So we'll start off with something small. So once you have whatever shape you're going to use, you need your Play-Doh. So you want to squish it out nice and flat. You want it, make sure it's a little bit thicker than whatever you're casting, so there's enough space for it to squish in the mold. So take the side that has all the ridges and detail on it and press that side down into the mold. You want it down in so it comes up to the Play-Doh comes up to all the edges, so you get all that nice detail in there. See? So once you got it nice and pressed in, stick your finger under there and pop it right back out again. And when you look at it, look at how all those details, all the ridges, all the lines showed up really nicely in there. So we'll set that aside. So once you have your mold, this is where we need the hot glue. So what you're going to do, you want to start filling this. Now, it doesn't have to be completely filled to the level, but you want to make sure you cover the whole thing so you get all the details right up to the edge. I usually like to start filling it in the center and then work out from there. So start in the middle, put it in, kind of work in circles around so you make sure you're covering all of it. There we go. Again, you want to make sure it goes all the way up to the edges. Get all those details. Now, as it dries, it's actually going to pull in back from a little bit from the edges. So it's okay if you go a little past beyond the edges. That can be trimmed off later. If you need to add more glue sticks in, go ahead and just keep adding as many as you need till you get it nice and full. There, we've got the edges all covered. There. Again, as I said, it doesn't have to be really deep, because what you just want is those shapes on the outside. Okay? Now, if you look, this turned out really clear, but sometimes when you're using hot glue, you can end up with bubbles in there. There's a few in there, but not too bad. If you do end up with bubbles, you can use a toothpick or the bottom of your paintbrush and just kind of poke the bubbles out to burst the bubbles. And then add in a little more hot glue if you need to fill it in. But you can see we went all the way to the edges, covered all the shapes. So that should form really nicely. If you have little strings coming off, that's okay. We can trim those off afterwards. Now, the hot glue usually will dry pretty quickly, depending on the size of it. If you were doing something huge like a starfish, that's going to take a little bit longer to dry. But something small like this should be dry in about 10-15 minutes. If you want it to go a little bit faster, you can actually stick it in the fridge for a few minutes. That'll dry it really quickly. So I'm going to set this aside and actually pull. I did a sample of that earlier that I did stick in the fridge to make sure it was done. So this is that same shape, that seashell. You can see nice and clear, no bubbles, so that came out really nicely. So once you have it nice and dry, and you can just tap it a little bit with your finger, you want it so it's not tacky at all and nice and hard. So once you're sure that it's dry, just stick your fingernails under the edges and that pops right out. You can see. As you can see, you still have the shape in your mold. So if you want to do a second one, you can. You can also take the shape and press it back in if you want to bring the details out a little bit more again. So once we pulled it out, you see our seashell shape. You can see all those ridges showed up. Now we've got a little bit of Play-Doh stuck in some of those ridges. So we can clean this up a little bit. You take your paintbrush, again, take the bottom of it or take a toothpick and just use it to kind of scrape some of that Play-Doh out of the ridges. And just clean it up a little bit. It comes out pretty easily. And if you've just got a little bit left, you can just take a paper towel and clean off that last bit. Now I don't mind something like a seashell. I don't mind leaving a little bit in there because it kind of adds a little color to it. So you can see most of that is cleared out. Now some of the edges are a little bit rough. Remember when we were pouring it in for our mold, we went a little bit beyond the edges because we knew it would pull in a little bit as it was drying. So some of our edges are going to be a little bit rough. That's why you use your scissors. You can actually just trim off those extra little bits on the edges. Or if you have any strings hanging off from, you know how the hot glue strings like to go on, you just trim those a bit. And then you have your shape. Now I did a couple other shapes earlier. So remember some of the samples we had out was like our rose button or our anchor button. So let's see how those turned out. This one I did of the rose. So remember what it looked like here. And let's see how close it got in our actual casting. Again, just stick your finger on it, pop it out, and there you can see all those petals showing up nice and clearly. You can see your mold is still good. So again, take your paintbrush, clear some of that extra out. Get it out of all the little ridges and the petal shapes because you want them to show up really well. Once we've got it cleaned up, again, take your paper towel, get any of the little bits off. As much as you can out of the ridges. And again, just like with our seashell, if any of the edges are rough, you can go ahead and trim it off. You can see we've got a couple little wispy strings hanging off. You can trim some of those edges, get those out of the way, and just kind of tidy it up a little bit. There. So now we have our rose. And actually, when we did the anchor button, You can see it's in here. Let's see how this one turned out. Oh, that pops up real easy. Nice and clean. Now the anchor's a little harder to see all the details on there, but you can see that little anchor shape right in there. Now the hard part with using hot glue is the glue itself is transparent. So that makes it a little harder to see some of those details. So this is where the paint comes in. We'll move our molds out of the way. How about let's do our rose. We'll make a nice pink rose. So we'll get a little paint and a paintbrush. And then we just start coloring it in. Now, as you see, once you start painting, then a lot of those details are going to start showing up really well. The ones that you couldn't see as well when it was see-through show up much easier when you add some color in there. Now, this is just tempera paint. You can use acrylic, whatever works. It all sticks pretty well to the hot glue. And you can put a couple coats in to really make the color pop out really well. But we'll just do a quick coat just so you can see how it looks. And you can see all those details starting to show up really nicely. So now you have a nice little pink rose. And I did earlier a couple seashells. You can see this was a larger seashell. See, it shows up all those, see all those ridges, how well they showed up? Or a smaller one, did in white. Looks almost real, doesn't it? So you can decorate and color these and paint them however you want. And that is how you do hot glue casting. And the nice thing is, you still have your molds if you want to do another one, or squish it back up and find another shape. And do as many castings as you like, just however much glue you have. All right, and that is hot glue casting. If you want to see any other DIY videos you have, you can check out our YouTube channel. Just go to our webpage, evpl.org, or search on YouTube, EVPL, and see what else we have available.